375. Is the author present? The chair recognizes the author of proposal number 375. The proposal author is recognized for a 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jackson, family of Alabama. May I reserve my right to use the remainder of my time in my closing summation?
That is your right.
I'm going to start off with a phrase for you. Gasoline prices. Kind of makes you cringe, doesn't it? It's something as teenagers we can all relate to. Either we're driving or we're driving our parents' cars, or we at least see our parents fill up the tank, and we see the price when it goes up. It's something that affects us directly as Americans. And who's to blame? Taxes? Partially. Speculation? Partially. But what is the largest factor to blame in oil prices? An organization called OPEC. Now, you're wondering, what is OPEC? OPEC is an organization that literally means Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And what that is, it's a group of Middle Eastern nations that get together, and they are the largest oil producers, and they set a price for exporting oil to countries such as the United States. And these aren't exactly friends of the United States. They're not exactly interested in our economic interests. They are a group of hostile nations that control the majority of our oil supply. So they are relatively a threat to the United States. It's dangerous to our economy as a whole, because if they chose to stop supplying us with oil, our economy would literally collapse. As you are all aware, the lifeblood of American economics is oil, and without that, we cannot function, and they currently control that. Now, changing topics a little, there is a solution to this, and that is the American agriculture industry. Now, America has a fantastic agriculture industry. It's one of the backbones of what has made America great, and many of you are familiar with the term that America is the breadbasket of the world, and this is quite true, and the staple of that breadbasket is wheat. Now, the Middle East, these countries in OPEC, are majorly reliant on the wheat that the United States exports. The United States is the largest exporter of wheat in the world, and so my proposal is to create an organization led by the United States of wheat exporting countries to create a collateral for oil prices. For example, when oil prices go up,
I'm sorry, Delegate, but your time has elapsed. The floor is now open for non-debatable technical questions. The chair recognizes Romano, Pandya, Phillips, Forward.
Romano, Mississippi. What are some other large wheat exporting countries?
I don't have the other statistics on large exporting wheat countries. The United States is the
Thank
largest exporter.
On the SC, I think the chair. Do you know how much oil the United States gets from OPEC, not just the entire world?
Not specifically, but the largest amount comes from OPEC.
The next question, please.
Phillips, Alabama, I'll withdraw my question.
The next question, please.
Howard, Minnesota, I also withdraw my question.
Further non-debatable technical questions. The chair recognizes Calhoun, Harrison, Coletti, Pandya.
Cahoon, Republic of Texas. How much oil does America have on reserve at this moment?
I don't have a statistic on it. Sorry.
Harrison, Georgia delegation. Do you currently have a figure representing America's exports versus their imports of oil?
That's an excellent question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy from the Massachusetts delegation. The proposal wants to know the citizenship status of most people working in agricultural jobs in America.
I would imagine that there are a lot of immigrants in that.
Next question, please. Pandya.
On the SC, thank you, chair. Although we get a majority of our oil from OPEC, is it not true that the majority of the United States oil comes from Canada?
That may be one of the large sources, yes.
Further non-debatable technical questions. The chair recognizes Cote. Choate. Messer.
So, Oklahoma, will this infringe on NAFTA or the World Trade Organization's rules?
I don't believe so, no.
Ben Missouri, Representative Delaware. What countries do we export wheat to the most?
The Middle East is one of the most reliant places on Americans specifically.
Chair recognizes further non-debatable. Small.
Small in Mexico. Do you have a quantitative number as to how much wheat we do export to the Middle East?
No, I'm afraid I don't. It's not specific.
All right, time for non-debatable technical questions has now elapsed. The floor is now open for con-pro debate. The chair will recognize a con speaker. The chair recognizes Donna Badian of Massachusetts.
Danny Donabedian, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. First, I would like to start out and say that OPEC is no threat to the safety of the United States oil. We only get 10% of our total oil from OPEC Middle Eastern nations. In fact, OPEC is not the same OPEC of the 1970s. their power has drastically decreased since they first been created. And also, we still do get tons of oil from other nations. In fact, an overwhelming majority of our oil comes from our allies in Canada, in Mexico, and in the United States itself. We don't rely on OPEC as much since we have found alternatives already. However, we still do give some money to OPEC, but that's not for American citizens. The United States buys some subsidies for U.S. oil industries who take that oil, but they do not come to the United States to sell it to us so that our prices of oil can go down. They go and sell it to Europe. So it's not OPEC's fault for this. It's in fact our big oil companies. But it's not to worry, since even if we weren't to have OPEC's oil, we still have at least an over 85% of our oil that will go in the United States, not that 10% that comes from OPEC Middle Eastern nations. I now yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
The delegate has yielded his time. The chair will now recognize the next pro speaker. The chair recognizes Pugliese.
Please, United Nations, thank you, Sir Chair. While I agree with the previous delegate that the power of OPEC has declined over the years, it remains an issue. However, let's take a look away from threats of various nations against the United States. Let's talk about the benefit this can do to the world as a whole. By centralizing into OPEC, as the author has suggested, making this organization known as such, what we can do is by centralizing, we are able to more drastically affect the needs of other countries when it comes to wheat. During a meditation yesterday, I heard from Mr. Miyagi that approximately 2% of the world's wheat that is produced could actually feed the world itself. However, due to issues between nations, I've actually researched it is almost impossible for that to occur. In doing so, we are allowed to help drastically affect starvation. Also, if you are looking at a selfish way of the geopolitical landscape, in creating this, it is a powerful bargaining tool. If people are going to restrict us in oil or another resource that we need, we are able to affect this in using this proposal. I highly recommend you rank it lowly because it is incredibly fantastic, wonderfully debatable, and extremely well researched. I yield the remainder of my time, Mr. Chair.
The delegate has yielded his time. Amendments are now in order. The chair will now recognize the next con speaker. The chair recognizes Reed of Washington.
Andrew Reed, Washington. I reserve the right to yield my time to Reagan of Ohio.
That is your right.
Thank you. I believe that I applaud the intent of the author. It's a very innovative idea, but I believe possibly a better way to rid ourselves of the power of OPEC is to begin to start exploring our own oil potential. We have some very large oil reserves that we have the ability to tap into, and I think now is the time to do that, and I yield my time to Reagan.
The delegate yields 45 seconds.
Reagan of Ohio. We've already talked about the fact that we don't get much more oil from OPEC, so that is a non-issue in my opinion. What we need to talk about is the fact that we are creating a monopoly on the wheat industry, and we are artificially manipulating the price of an essential good to human life. Furthermore, we set a dangerous precedent when we start controlling the prices of things. For example, OPEC, like we know, controls oil prices. In 2008, oil prices plummeted from $100 a barrel to about $50, causing Middle Eastern nations to get panicky, and then they had to raise the price. When we do not allow the free market to choose the price of goods, bad things happen. Furthermore, do we want things like the Organization of Tomato Exporting Countries? Do we want things like the Organization of...
I'm sorry, delegate, but your time has elapsed. The chair will now recognize the final pro speaker. If such a speaker exists on the floor. The chair recognizes Holland of Georgia.
Thank you, Sir Chair. Elizabeth Holland, Georgia delegation. May I just commend the author on a great innovative idea. I know many of you probably have cars and go to the gas pump, and this past spring probably saw how high prices were and felt that in your wallets. I know I was one of them. Also, in addition to this innovative idea, most people for oil prices offer the suggestion of drilling. He's offering the suggestion of bargaining. This is giving us the chance to have something to work with, to say that, no, we're not going to go drill. We're going to make a deal with you. and we can bargain to get a fair oil price for American citizens. And as far as the previous delegate stated with a monopoly, the author states in his proposal that we are the fourth largest. So in addition, there are other sources to get their wheat from. This is just a great idea, and I suggest that you rank this proposal.
By her actions, the delegate has yielded her time to the chair. The chair will now recognize the final con-speakers. Such a speaker exists on the floor. The chair recognizes Zupko of New Jersey.
Zupko, New Jersey. I reserve the right to yield time to Candia of South Carolina.
That is your right. Please display both your placards.
Okay. Well, I just see this as a concern that OPEC may view this as a challenge and the situation may escalate further from the point that it's at now. And we have to realize that this isn't just affecting our country, but it's affecting other countries around the world, because we can't just view this as ourselves, the OPEC nations. We have to see how many other people that this is affecting. And I yield the remainder of my time to Pandya.
Delegate yields 50 seconds.
Pandya, SC, I thank the chair. If in order, will the two yield to a possible series of questions?
Does the author yield? Of course, he yields.
Okay, the two biggest importers of United States oil, Canada and Mexico, do you know if they're reliant on wheat?
It is my understanding that they are very reliant on wheat and that they are also friendly nations to the United States.
Do you have any percentages for that?
I do not have percentages, no.
All right, moving on. I want to point out that Canada and Mexico, if they're not dependent on wheat, then this proposal is in essence just creating a useless committee. As a previous delegate pointed out, we don't need to have the Organization of Tomato Exporting Countries. Moving on, the EIA, Energy Information Association, points out that ever since 2009, oil price shocks have not been a result of OPEC, but rather the tensions between the United States and Middle Eastern nations such as Iran.
I'm sorry, delegate, but your time has expired. The time for pro-con debate has now elapsed. The author is recognized for his 2-minute closing summation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jackson family of Alabama. I'd like to thank everyone for the wonderful pro-con debate, especially some of the con points that were brought up. I think there are some very real concerns that I would like to address. First of all, several delegates brought up the fact that Canada and Mexico are very large oil importers, and that they are trade allies with the United States. And I think that is very true. We do get a lot of oil from them. I'm not trying to deny that. But they are also friendly nations. They're not nations that we're worried about our supply of oil suddenly cutting off from. We're not worried about losing that supply suddenly overnight. Also, they say that OPEC oil is not a threat, but this is simply not true. We've seen that conflict in the Middle East has ratcheted up oil prices, as we saw back in the Arab Spring. The amount of oil coming out during the Arab Spring was as high as it ever was, but because there was conflict going on there, OPEC saw reason to raise the oil prices. This directly reflected on gasoline prices in the United States, as we are all aware of. Moving on, alternatives have been found. I think that the delegate was referencing the fact that there are alternative sources of energy and alternative trade partners. And while I agree with that, we need to keep as many options open as possible until we can switch over to something more viable than gasoline. Currently, we have to have oil, and this is a good way to secure it. They also say that there are places we can drill here, and I agree with that entirely. I would love to drill in the United States, but currently the legislation that is on the books does not allow us to drill in the United States, and trying to get through that with various government organizations in favor of environmental protection and whatnot, it is a very, very difficult thing to do, and this is a simpler way to accomplish the same goal. Also, there was an idea brought up about, if we create sort of a useless committee, then we'll have things like the tomato exporting nations and that sort of thing, but wheat is not like tomatoes. Wheat is a staple of all food. It is a grain. Anyone who's familiar with the food pyramid would know that grains are the majority of what you're supposed to eat in a day. It is what countries rely on. I think that this is a safer way to foster interdependence. It is a way to better direct wheat to countries where it needs to go. We can solve
Thank
a lot
you,
of
author. Your time has expired. We are now in order for a period of ranking. CLC members and chairs, please approach the desk.